From the outside, my rural life appeared to be ideal. A lovely house with a well-kept lawn, a sparkling pool in the backyard, and a loving husband who put in endless hours to support us. Our son, John, was 21 years old, about to graduate from college, and full of promise to the world. However, behind the closed doors of our immaculate home, things were anything but ideal. When my husband Albert was home, the warmth that had previously pervaded our marriage had been replaced with stillness, and I frequently felt like a ghost in my own home because he spent most of his time at work or devoted to his phone and TV. It was a calm Saturday afternoon in early summer when I first really noticed Robert. He was John's best friend, a self-assured and well-behaved young man who had been coming over for months. I had never really paid much attention to him before, but something changed that day when John invited Robert over for a swim. As I stood in the kitchen, I looked out the sliding glass doors and saw them laughing by the pool. Robert stood at the water's edge, his toned body gleaming in the sunlight. He dove in with ease, emerging with a grin that was both striking and carefree for a brief moment. His vitality was so different from my husband's weariness that I couldn't take my eyes off of him. Over the following few weeks, his distracted manner caused a feeling in me that I hadn't had in years. I shrugged it off and went back to doing the dishes, but my thoughts kept returning to him. With each visit, I grew more conscious of Robert's presence. He and John worked out in the garage, played video games late into the night, and relaxed by the pool. His voice, his laughter, even his scent lingering in the air long after he'd left one afternoon. While John ran to the store, Robert came inside for a drink. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Carter, mind if I grab some water?" he asked, his deep voice catching me off guard. "Of course, Robert," I replied, forcing a casual tone. "And please just call me Emily." He flashed a charming smile, "Thanks, Emily," as he reached for a glass our hands brushed. It was a fleeting, insignificant touch, but it sent a shock through me. I pulled away quickly, hoping he hadn't noticed the way my breath hitched. "Sorry about that," he chuckled. "It's fine," I murmured, my cheeks warming. As he left the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, trying to calm the racing thoughts in my head. What was wrong with me? I was a married woman in my 40s, yet here I was, blushing over a man half my age that night after everyone had gone to bed. I sat by the pool, watching the moonlight dance on the water's surface. I told myself it was just a harmless infatuation, something that would fade with time, but deep down I knew better. The days passed, and no matter how hard I tried to suppress my feelings, they only intensified. Robert wasn't just handsome, he was attentive. He noticed things, the way I hesitated before answering a question, the way my smiles didn't quite reach my eyes one evening as I was folding laundry near the living room window. I overheard John and Robert playing basketball outside. Their shirts were off, their bodies glistening with sweat from the summer heat. I tried to focus on my task, but my eyes kept drifting toward Robert. Then it happened. He caught me watching. He smiled. Not just a friendly smile, but one that felt knowing, almost teasing. My heart pounded as I quickly looked away, pretending to busy myself with the laundry. Minutes later, he was standing by the open window, his voice laced with something I couldn't quite decipher. "You should come outside more. Emily, get some sun." I forced a smile. "I'm fine right here." But his words lingered. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, like a challenge. That night, as I cleaned up after dinner, Robert entered the kitchen. "Need any help?" he asked. "No, I've got it," I said, not meeting his gaze, but he didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the counter, watching me. "You work too hard," he said, softly. "Someone should take care of you for a change." I froze, my hands gripping the dish towel. No one had spoken to me like that in years. I should have ended it right there, walked away, said something to break whatever was happening between us. But I didn't. The night, everything changed. My husband and John were at a basketball game in the city. The house was unusually quiet. Robert had stayed behind, claiming he wasn't a fan of sports. I didn't question it. I was curled up on the couch with a book, though I hadn't processed a single word. When Robert appeared in the doorway, my pulse quickened. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, holding up a glass of water. I nodded. He sat beside me, closer than he ever had before. The air between us was thick, charged with something undeniable. "You seem nervous," he said after a moment. "I'm fine." I lied, though. My hands trembled slightly. He reached out and took the book from my hands, placing it on the table. "Emily," he murmured, his voice steady. "You don't have to pretend with me." Hearing him say my name like that without the formalities sent a shiver through me. "I can't," I whispered. "You can." He countered his gaze, locking onto mine. "I know you feel it too," and I did. I stopped thinking, stopped worrying about consequences. I leaned in and he met me halfway when our lips touched. Weeks of buried desire erupted like a dam breaking. His hands were strong yet gentle, his touch igniting something I had long forgotten for weeks. Our affair continued, stolen, moments, secret glances, every encounter more reckless than the last. But secrets have a way of surfacing. One evening, my husband found Adrian's hoodie draped over a dining chair. "Did Robert leave this here?" Albert asked casually. "Yes," I said too quickly, my heart hammering. He must have forgotten it. He narrowed his eyes but didn't press further. The final blow came. Days later. Albert walked in at the worst possible moment. Robert's hand brushing against mine in the kitchen, his face darkened. "What the hell is going on?" The room went silent. John appeared in the doorway, confused. "What's happening?" Albert turned to him, his voice sharp. "How well do you really know your friend in that moment?" Everything unraveled. John stormed out, devastated. Robert left, his confidence replaced by shame. Albert and I were left in the kitchen, the weight of my betrayal settling between us. The weeks that followed were hell. John refused to speak to me. Albert moved into the guest room. Robert disappeared from our lives. Some mistakes can never be undone. Months later, I'm still living with the consequences of one moment of weakness. My marriage is hanging by a thread, and my relationship with John may never recover. Robert, he's moved on. I saw him once, but we didn't speak. James had been my son Albert's best friend for years, frequently coming over to hang out, work out in the garage, and swim in the backyard pool. He was a confident, athletic young man, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I couldn't deny the way I felt when he was around. Days turned into weeks, and despite my efforts to bury my emotions, the tension between us only grew stronger. Every fleeting touch, every stolen glance, every seemingly harmless conversation carried an unspoken weight. One evening, Albert had plans to meet up with some friends, and Thomas was stuck at work late again. James lingered after dinner, claiming he wasn't in a rush to get home. I was in the kitchen cleaning up when he walked in, his presence filling the space. "You okay?" he asked, leaning against the counter. I nodded too quickly. "Just tired. You've seemed off lately." He continued, his voice low, like you're carrying something heavy. I hesitated, gripping the edge of the sink. Life's just complicated. James took a step closer, and I felt my breath hitch. It doesn't have to be. His fingers brushed against mine, sending a jolt through me. I should have pulled away. I should have told him to leave. But instead, I turned to face him. "Him. James." I started, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes mirrored everything I had been trying to suppress. Then, in a moment of weakness, I crossed the line I swore I never would. The days that followed were a dangerous blur. We were careful, stealing moments when Albert wasn't around, keeping our encounters brief but charged with intensity. But no matter how careful we thought we were, secrets like ours never stayed hidden for long. The first crack appeared when Thomas started asking questions. "James has been around a lot lately," he commented one night over dinner, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Albert shrugged. "Yeah, he likes it here." Thomas turned his attention to me. "And you don't think that's strange?" I forced a laugh, playing it off. "He's practically family." But the suspicion had been planted, and then the worst thing that could happen happened one evening. James and I were alone in the living room. I had told myself 100 times that we needed to stop. But when he reached for me, my resolve crumbled once again. Neither of us heard the front door open. Mom, Albert's voice was like a gunshot, freezing us in place. He stood in the doorway, his face pale, eyes wide with betrayal. The room was suffocating with silence. James stepped back immediately, but the damage was already done. Albert's expression shifted from shock to disgust. "Are you kidding me?" His voice was barely controlled, shaking with anger. "Albert, please." I started stepping toward him. "Don't," he spat. "Just don't." James tried to speak, but Albert turned on him next. "You were my best friend. How could you?" His voice trembled, but it was full of rage. The following few minutes were a haze of yelling. James remained frozen with guilt on his face as Albert raced upstairs and slammed his bedroom door so fiercely that the walls shook. Thomas then entered and demanded to know what the hell was going on. Without waiting for an explanation, he muttered something about leaving and ran out the door. Thomas faced me, his expression opaque. "Olivia, my marriage and my connection with my kid were on the verge of disintegrating, and my heart was racing." Albert never spoke to James again, and my son moved out shortly after, unable to look at me the same way. I don't know, but his voice was cold, his jaw was tight, and he told me the truth. And just like that, the life I had constructed was over. Within a few weeks, Thomas filed for divorce, and my life fell apart. James tried to reach out to me, but I ignored him. Our relationship wasn't love. Rather, it was a mistake that cost me everything. I now live alone in a quiet house, haunted by regret over the decisions I made. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartfelt and intense tales.